gonna try to show you how I teach how to take Lotus. Nice big feet. I always try to teach bringing the knee nice and close to the chest, all the way up to the chest, so that you're kind of close in the gap between your chest and the knee, and also keeping the heel of the foot close to your thigh. And so in order to keep that heel close to the thigh and the knee up to the chest, if you can always point your foot, which also sets you up for the final setting of Lotus, which is with a straight line from the foot through your ankle up to your knee. And you're trying to maintain that straight line in your ankle so that it doesn't sickle like this when you're in Lotus. So you want to try and avoid that sickling of the ankle, which is causing creasing in here. So as you bring your foot up to your chest, you bring the knee to the side, and you keep, I try not to feed the hand from underneath. That's how you can see the straight line, but I try not to feed the hand from underneath, because then you kind of you're opening up a bit of a gap here. So instead, I try to hold the hand from the front of the shin and ankle, pushing the heel into the thigh, and then lifting the heel towards your navel. So it comes up and lines up with the midline of your body. So heel towards navel, and then you spin from the hip joint, which is like this area here, can't see it, and you spin it in to take the half Lotus. So the spinning comes from this area here, not up here, this area right here, where the femur bone attaches into the pelvis. So from here, spinning in, and then what happens is that the foot automatically comes into half Lotus. Of course, this is provided that your hips are open enough that you can keep holding the heel into your thigh. Then you do the same thing with the other side, bringing the leg out to the side. Now, the thing with the second side is that you want to be careful that you don't lift your foot over your knee, because what that does is actually torquing into the knee here, and that's putting pressure on your knee, and that's how you could get injured knee. So you do the same thing, you bring the heel in towards the midline of your body, and then you hold from the front, trying to keep a straight line from your toes through your ankle all the way out to the knee, and then you just lift towards the midline of your body, and then from here you're spinning again from the hip, spinning in, taking the other half into Lotus. So you got full Lotus. So as you can see, my heels are kind of, not exactly, but they're lining up with the midline, and that's what you're trying to work on. You can also see that the tops of my foot is kind of turning upwards. Not great, but eventually that's what you're working towards, getting, sorry, it's the bottom of the foot that's spinning up, and the top of the foot is kind of moving towards the thigh. That's a safe way to take Lotus. Then there's the other option, or the other side of Lotus, is that you be careful coming out. So when you're coming out, again, you're not moving your foot over the knee. Instead, you're actually sliding from the hip joint. So you're moving your feet apart. So your knees are still together, and you're still protecting the knees as you come out of Lotus, as opposed to opening the knee joint when you're coming forward with the foot. And then that puts pressure on the knee joint because you're torquing your leg. The other thing to consider is the position of your pelvis. You don't want to tilt the pelvis backwards, because in effect what you're trying to do is close the gap between your heel and your front midline. So if you're tilting backwards, then you're further away, whereas if you're tilting your hip forward, it's easier to bring the heel close to the midline. So most people can get to this position and here, and then they might have trouble from here because of the hip opening. So what you want to work on is just getting the toes into the other joint, as opposed to trying to get your foot further past the thigh, because again that opens up the knee. So if you're a beginner, I would recommend that you keep the heel as close to the thigh as possible, even if it's just the tops of the toes that are coming into the other thigh. You'll end up having more creasing in here, and maybe even a little bit of pain as you're starting this. The more you do it, the better it gets. And then as you take the other side, it comes out a little bit, but as long as you're keeping it in there, and then bringing in it again towards the knee line, so towards the midline. So you see how my heels are pretty close to each other here. Heels lifting up, and they're pretty close. And then what you work on after that is working on spinning the knees towards each other. And as you're spinning the knees towards each other, you're getting deeper into your lotus. And then you can also work on this line staying straighter so you don't get creasing in here. So again, there. What else? Coming out. Careful coming out. In Ashtanga, we always start with the right leg first. But if you don't practice Ashtanga, or if you don't do this often, I would recommend that you start with the most easiest side. And then I would also recommend that you alternate it so that you're not always doing it the one way. In Ashtanga, you do it the one way for a particular reason. But any other type of yoga, again, trying to keep the heels as close to the midline as possible. Hope that helps.